Thank you for joining us for today's ceremony. We are pleased to be joined today by such a distinguished panel. People from around the world have registered to participate in this event. To ensure a stable connection, and considering the large number of attendees, your video and audio functions have been disabled. You can still actively participate in the discussion by expressing your views, sending us your comments, and asking questions using the Q&A feature. Please note that we have already received many questions by email, so we may not have enough time to get to yours. We'll do our best. You can also listen in by telephone. The international numbers are in the confirmation email message you have received. Today's session is being recorded and will be made available online in the near future. It is now my pleasure to give the floor to the Director General of the NEA, Mr. William D. Magwood IV. Sir.
Thank you very much, and welcome to all of you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're located. Next week will mark 10 years since the great Tohoku earthquake and tsunami struck northeastern Japan. While we're here today to discuss the nuclear accident that was created by that disaster, we all recognize that the true tragedy was the loss of over 20,000 men, women, and children from the tsunami that swept over so many communities in Japan. Before beginning our discussion today, I'd like to ask everyone with me today online to observe a moment of silence and honor all those who lost their lives. Thank you very much. As with all historic events, you remember where you were when you heard the news and what you were doing. For me, when the tsunami struck, I was asleep in Washington, D.C. when I woke to the news on the radio, and the radio was describing the tragedy unfolding in Japan. I rushed to my office at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and my staff and I watched the horrible scenes on television, and I tried to reach friends and colleagues in Japan to make sure they were unharmed. Over the course of the morning, we started to shift our attention from the tsunami itself to news about the Fukushima Daiichi plant. At first, we were encouraged not to be too concerned, but over the course of the day, the worries continued to grow. And by evening, we knew we were dealing with a multiple severe accident. That day shaped much of my professional life over the last 10 years, first as a nuclear regulatory commissioner, and then later as Director General of the NEA. Since that tragedy, the NEA has been working with Japan and our member states on a wide range of issues covering both the technical and non-technical aspects of the Fukushima Daiichi accident and its impacts. Today, we reflect on what we've learned and what needs to continue to be done. We've captured many of these reflections in a new report that's been being released today, the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant accident, 10 years on, progress, lessons, and challenges. And you may now download the report from our homepage. I also note that Japanese translation of the report will soon follow. The report, while containing considerable technical information, is intended to be accessible to the general reader. In fact, I challenge the authors to create a report that I could give to my favorite sushi chef at Hitachi Naka the next time I visit there. The report will be discussed in today's webinar, and we will present the multidimensional issues that are discussed within it. To help with this, I'm very grateful to have 7 prominent international experts from around the world join us to provide their perspectives. I thank the government of Japan and many colleagues in Japan and from all around the world who supported this work and made very important contributions to its contents. We will begin today with an overview of the report presented by Dr. Mike Wakeman, who was a member of the consultant team that did much of the work on this report. Mike was for many years Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Nuclear Installations and Executive Head of the Office of Nuclear Regulation in the UK. Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bill. I have been asked to go through the NEA 10 years on report over the next 10 minutes. If I could have the first slide, please. There is a lot to get through in that time, so forgive me if I mainly concentrate on some aspects and not dwell on others. And as Bill has said, you have access to the report to look at it at leisure yourself. First of all, let me give you some background, slide 2. It is based on contributions from NEA and other experts and leaders from across the world under the guidance of Bill Magwood. It is aimed primarily at policymakers and leaders, but also to aid the understanding of the public and others. It is the third in a series of similar NEA reports, but providing more about future perspectives and obviously complements the important work of others, particularly the IEA and WANO. Slide 3, please. The report covers the accident and its aftermath, including decommissioning and remediation, looks at safety and other lessons at international level and their global impact. Further challenges or opportunities are also looked at, and it provides some conclusions and suggestions for actions. I will now outline some aspects of the report. Slide 4, please. Let me first remind you about the accident. Slide 5, please. The Great East Japan earthquake, magnitude 9, initiated the sequence of events leading to the accident, an immensely large natural event. This caused a highly destructive tsunami spreading inland in the next hour, causing around 20,000 people to die or be missing, sadly. Greatly impaired the infrastructure, including all the nuclear plants on the East Coast, but the greatest impact at the Fukushima Daiichi site. Slide 6, please. Slide 7, please. At Fukushima Daiichi, in response to the earthquake, the operating reactors shut down as designed, and backup cooling was established as the earthquake caused all 6 off-site power lines to fail. Slide 8, please. The tsunami at Fukushima Daiichi, over 15 meters high, caused backup AC power system to fail for reactors 1 to 4. And over the next days, the operators tried valiantly to maintain cooling and containment of the reactors. Slide 9, please. These efforts eventually failed, and hydrogen evolution from high temperature water steam reactions with zirconium materials led to explosions in reactors 1, 3, and 4, fuel melt and further site devastation, and significant off-site releases of radioactivity. Slide 10, please. Off-site emergency arrangements were initiated, and from the earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear accident, around 150,000 people were evacuated. Large areas of land were contaminated with deposition from radioactive releases. Additionally, large amounts of contaminated water were generated at the site. While radiation from the accident is not considered to have had any direct effect on human health, the impact of the evacuation is reported to have led to earlier deaths. As well, importantly, the events badly affected the well-being of people and communities, and continued to do so for some time. All nuclear power plants in Japan shut down, hitting the economy. Slide 11, please. After providing an up-to-date picture of the accident and its aftermath, the report goes on to look at the present status of the decommission of the site and the remediation of the surrounding areas. He notes this is an immense and complex task, but the Japanese government has set a clear road ahead, and there has been impressive progress on and off the site, as summarized in this site and detailed in the report, although there is much hard work ahead. Slide 12, please. The report also summarizes the policy responses in Japan, setting up new organizations, new nuclear regulatory requirements, changing legislation to enhance safety, emergency preparedness, and the nuclear liability framework. Examples for others across the world to consider. Slide 13, please. Building on this, the report notes the great benefit arising from international institutions and nations working together, greatly facilitated by the openness, transparency, and support of the Japanese government, and summarizes the work of the IAEA, other UN organizations, the ICRP and WANO, and of course, the work and initiatives of the NEA. Slide 14, please. It also outlines the global impact and lessons learned as set down in this slide and summarized. Slide 15, please. Chapter 6 presents some continuing challenges or opportunities for learning from the accident. Slide 16, please. Technical challenges, especially around fuel debris recovery, decontamination techniques, and waste management and disposal of the contaminated materials generated in fuel debris on the site. Also challenges for regulators with unknowns and uncertainties about the future. Rebuilding and revitalizing communities and local economies, more effective public and stakeholder engagement. Slide 17, please. Taking a more holistic approach to optimize decision-making, adopting a system approach for national nuclear safety arrangements, considering the adoption of nuclear ethical principles by leaders and all involved, an international approach to knowledge management to ensure hard-won lessons are not lost, better legal preparedness, and building on the benefits of international organizations working together. Slide 18, please. The report builds on this and earlier chapters to provide a strategic perspective and set of conclusions as set down in this slide and the next, slide 19, please. And finally, in chapter 8, slide 20, please. It suggests actions predominantly to assist Japan in its further response to the Fukushima Daiichi accident. Slide 21, please. But which also may show the world how to improve the safe utilization of peaceful nuclear power to the benefit of all. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that overview, and I'm sure people are looking forward to downloading the report and reading it. We are next going to move to Dr. Yamana. Dr. Yamana is the head of Japan's Damage Compensation and Decommissioning Facilitation Corporation, in a more concise way known as NDF. Dr. Yamana is a very great partner of ours. We've worked on many different activities, and it's a great pleasure to have him join us today from Japan. Dr. Yamana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bill, and hello to you all. Thank you, Mike, for your comprehensive introduction. Indeed, this report is very helpful for Japan, and I'd like to thank Bill and NEA colleagues for their efforts in publishing this comprehensive report. I think the major focus in this session is how to reflect the lessons obtained to make world's nuclear safety safer. But because I am in charge of the post-accident response, I'd like to introduce perspectives from the viewpoint of dealing with the post-accident response. First, I'd like you to understand that Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant is now managed in a quite stable condition, and that the necessary decommissioning works are progressing surely. So you can understand that one FD&D is already in the stage of mid and long-term cleanup. As you well know, the retrieval of the fuel debris will be the critical challenge, but TEPCO is now beginning a preliminary engineering for the future full-scale operation for it. As for the offsite, considerable progress has also been made in the restoration of the affected areas with massive government support. The evacuation order initially issued for a wide area has been gradually lifted, and the inhabitation band area has been decreased to 1/5 of the original one. Progress has been also made in the recovery of social infrastructures and public livelihood. Although the return of the evacuated residents is still limited, unfortunately, social reconstruction is making strides. As for the improvement of the nuclear safety in Japan, what I feel is the most important is that the nuclear safety regulation was drastically revised, achieving a certain integrity of the independent and transparent regulation. However, on the other hand, there is a serious loss of trust to nuclear power among the public, and we are faced with the harsh opposition to nuclear power that accounts for majority of public opinion. This situation shows that the most important thing is the trust from the public, and I believe that the proactive and responsible basic stance of operators to try always to enhance nuclear safety as much as possible is essential. And there is no doubt that sharing information with the public through cross-dialogue is essential too. Next, I would like to share with you some of the important points I strongly felt through my experience of the post-accident efforts, with the hope that these will let you think about a precaution against a possible nuclear incident and let you think about the way for the decommissioning of nuclear legacy sites existing in every country as well. The first point is the significance of the strong initiative and leadership of the government, which is backed by the legal framework. And a clear definition of the responsibility sharing among the relevant organizations for the disaster and legacy response is necessary for this. In Japan, as you know, in order to supplement the insufficiency against the unexpected disaster of such magnitude, all sorts of measures were taken in a hurry. The legal establishment of my organization, enabling huge amount of the compensation to the victims and materializing oversight to TEPCO was a key for this. The lesson is that a nationwide systematic mechanism for multiple organizations to work together for the response to the nuclear accident should be prepared for the case of emergency. Regarding with the decommissioning process, I want to focus on 4 important perspectives. The first point is the importance of the concept of ALARP as low as reasonably practicable and risk-based approach. This is because we will have to achieve an acceptable low level of risk within limited cost and time. The second point is the importance of changing the business culture or nature of the responsible entity, TEPCO in our case, to the one that specializes in decommissioning, particularly in terms of the projectization and lead and learn approach against the existing huge uncertainty and unknowns. Reinforcement of its engineering capability is also important. The third point is the safety regulation to be posed to the decommissioning. Because this decommissioning with big uncertainty will have to proceed in step-by-step manner, a flexible and less deterministic regulation would be more effective to enable and accelerate it. The fourth point is the stakeholder involvement. Getting public perception on the decommissioning plan in conjunction with the future vision of the revitalization of the surrounding area will be the key, and close communication with the residents are essential. And we should note that we never have a quick fix for this. In addition, mitigation of the public's worry about radiation safety and dispelling reputational damages are also important challenges with sociological difficulty. And this is what we are facing in terms of the treatment of the treated water. Let me touch upon another topic on technical process. It is the importance of the forensic study, which means investigations during the operation on the results of the core disruption and its progression. The first-hand data obtained from 1F will have a high value because it is expected to contribute to the enhancement of the database of the severe accident. So this has been vigorously discussed mainly in the NEA's platform, but we will have to specify and materialize what we can do within the acceptable influence to the progress of the D&D. Last but not the least, I appreciate the international cooperation with other countries. In fact, sharing experience and expertise among countries addressing nuclear legacies and having internationally shareable principles or guidelines for the legacy response will be very helpful for us. And so this opportunity is very appreciable from my side. So I hope these perspectives of our experience would be referred in establishing accident-resistant nuclear system in other countries. And this is the same to the response to world's nuclear legacy sites. So that's all I can speak in within 7 minutes. So thank you, Bill.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yamana, for your remarks. Very insightful, and appreciate your comments at the very end. Olivier Gupta, who is Director General of France's Nuclear Regulatory Authority, the ASN, and he joins us today also representing the Western European Nuclear Regulatory Association, of which he is chair. Mr. Gupta, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bill, and especially thank you for this excellent initiative. Each major nuclear accident has led to improvements in safety approaches. So what can we say about Fukushima 10 years after this accident? You can go to the next slide, please. Yeah. In my opinion, the main learning of this accident is the need for more resilience, both for the facilities, but also for organizations. The design against the flooding was insufficient. So an easy way could have been to say, let's increase the design requirements against flooding. And this is not the way that was chosen in Europe. Rather, the philosophy of the European stress tests that were implemented just after this accident was to say they lost the ultimate heat sink, they lost all electricity sources, and they faced a core meltdown. So how to prevent such situations, whatever their root cause is, flooding, earthquake, or anything else? And second, how to manage them if they occur anyway? The answer to the first question, how to prevent, is about looking at the margins. How to improve the margins to pull away the cliff edge effects, if any. And as a result of this, many design improvements have been implemented on European power plants precisely to pull away these cliff edge effects, to gain more time to recover the situation. This is something very important. And for instance, in all WELMAC countries, diverse diesel generators are now available on site, and the sites have an autonomy of at least 3 days, which is much more than previously. And that's an example of improving resilience of the facilities. Now, to answer the second question, you have to suppose that this situation can occur and be ready to manage them. So to this purpose, the operators now have mobile means, I mean by that pipes, pumps, and so on, to recover the key safety functions. And they also have trained teams to implement these mobile means, even if the surroundings of the site are damaged, because that was also a learning from Fukushima. And that's mainly about improving the resilience of the organizations also themselves. In a second step, the regulations have been updated to take into account these lessons. And in Europe, the basis of this update was the revision of the WNRA safety reference levels. I have to say a word about what are the WNRA safety reference levels. They are mainly based on the IAEA safety standards. They are not legally binding. However, they are morally binding, and their implementation in national regulations in WNRA countries is peer-reviewed. So these safety reference levels have been updated to incorporate the lessons from Fukushima, such as multi-unit situations, destruction of infrastructure, obviously extreme natural events, but also protection and training of personnel. These are some examples. This is not exhaustive. And for instance, as a result, they state the need for independent and diverse heat removal means, one being effective for natural hazards which are exceeding the design basis. I think we can go to the next slide, please. My third message is that as other major accidents, Fukushima speeded up changes, and many things that were impossible became possible. I think we can have many examples of that. I want to quote an example of time acceleration that I kept in mind. It is about the European stress test specifications. It's always difficult to agree and to get a consensus across 20 countries or even more. But these specifications were developed and approved within a couple of weeks by European regulators within WNRA. And the reason was that we all felt the need to quickly converge given the stakes. And I want also to stress that this has been possible because we already had a long way together inside this club, WNRA. We knew each other, we trust each other, but I think that again, the accident of Fukushima also made this acceleration of time possible. My fourth and last message is about increased openness and international cooperation that was also made possible after this accident. Awareness of regulators that we need to better involve the local population in the decision-making processes if we want these decisions to be understood and applied. This awareness was clearly raised after the accident. I could speak also about openness of regulators, including openness of WNRA to regulators outside Europe. In 2015, we accepted Japan, Canada, Russia as observers. And this has proven to be very beneficial to all parties because involving such large nuclear countries outside Europe has brought WNRA additional experience and has also been a way to promote the WNRA safety reference levels. So I will stop here and just conclude that we all knew that it would take a long time, at least a decade, to collect and implement the experience feedback from this accident. I think this is precisely what is doing this excellent report from NEA, which provides a good picture of what has already been done. And I'm sure that we will all be able to build on this report to further develop our learnings, especially on the long-term management of a damaged site and of the surroundings. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gupta. And I particularly echo your last comment about the increased international exchange since the accident. I think it's fair to say that the interaction between operators and regulators has been intensive since the accident. It really is far beyond anything we've ever seen before. So it's if there's a bright side to all of this, it certainly is the much enhanced international cooperation. So thank you for your remarks. I'll move on to the next speaker, which is Dr. Richard Meserve. Dr. Meserve is Senior Counsel, Covington and Burring LLP, located in Washington, D.C. He is also President Emeritus of the Carnegie Institution for Science and former Chairman of the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Dr. Meserve, pleasure to have you here as always, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bill. I'm really pleased to have an opportunity to join you, although it's a very early morning in Washington, D.C. right now. Since last March, I haven't had occasion to get up this early, so it's getting back to my old ways. Let me just say, I think that the report that we're discussing today is really excellent. It is a comprehensive review of the events and all of the lessons that have been drawn from it. It's a very thoughtful effort. I would like to focus, however, on one aspect of the Japanese response that is mentioned only in passing, but which I think is significant and has not really been acknowledged in many of the discussions I've seen of the Fukushima accident and its aftermath. And that is that over the past decade, there has been very significant and important institution building in Japan that bears on the safety and I hope will provide confidence that going forward that there is continuing progress and effort to improve the safety performance. Let me just mention several of the institutions that have been created. First, we've already heard from Yamada-san about the NDF, which of course is drawing international expertise into the work of conducting the D&D associated with the Fukushima site. That's going to be a very great challenge, and there's going to be much that will be learned over time as a result of that work and understanding the accident better and what needs to be done. And of course, in the challenges of completing the decommissioning. Second organization I'd mention is the Nuclear Regulation Authority. It was, of course, created as the regulator, as Mike indicated, after the Fukushima accident. It was created to establish an independent, competent, and serious regulator. It has served over the last decade to significantly enhance the safety requirements. It's undertaken serious and comprehensive reviews of each plant before they were allowed to restart. And in that connection, of course, there's been massive construction that's been undertaken to greatly strengthen the plants. For example, there's huge seawalls that have been built to deal with the tsunami threat. And it is moved forward in using risk insights as the focus of its regulatory effort. That is evidenced by its complete reform of the inspection program to use risk insights to guide the work. The third institution that's been created is the Nuclear Risk Research Center, which was part of ICRP, and it's building the capacity to undertake modern probabilistic risk assessments, which of course is a tool that enables the deep evaluation of possible vulnerabilities and of the way to address them. This development of this capacity, which is occurring throughout the nuclear industry in Japan, will greatly enhance the ability of the NRA and the utilities to ensure safe operations. The fourth institution, which is new one, it is well enhanced since the Fukushima accident, is the Japan Nuclear Safety Institute, also known as JANSI. It's built on the model of the Institute for Nuclear Operations in the United States, and it reflects a commitment of the nuclear industry to police itself. It reflects something that has been a grim lesson that Japan has learned, that a failure to ensure safety at one plant can have devastating effects on the whole industry. And JANSI is a way that the industry itself polices the performance of all its members to assure achievement of safety. JANSI has a strong connection with INPO, which is in the US, forms a similar function. It was created after the 3 Mile Island accident. The fifth organization that was established is the Atomic Energy Association, ATENA. And its role is to develop safety-related guidelines and to coordinate with the NRA on measures to improve safety. During my time with the US NRC, I saw that engagement with a knowledgeable intermediary was a very effective way to establish new regulatory requirements in ways that impose minimal cost and disruption to the industry. Of course, the first obligation is to assure safety, but if it can be done in a way that is that minimizes the adverse effects, that obviously is desirable. Now, I think that the creation of these 5 institutions is really quite remarkable and important. It reflects complementary actions by the regulator and the industry to achieve safety, and it really serves to strengthen the entire industry. The establishment of institutions means that they're entities that have a high likelihood of enduring over time, thereby helping to assure that the emphasis on safety that has marked the last decade will continue and persist on into the future. I would also note the mission of these agencies to strengthen nuclear safety can provide greater confidence that the measures taken already will not be viewed as, okay, we've taken care of this problem, we can move on. All of these organizations are dedicated to learning more about the safety consequences of the operation of nuclear facilities, and they provide a vehicle to assuring that these efforts to improve safety will be enhanced as more is learned. I should also note that one of the interesting dimensions of this is that these organizations all have strong international connections, in that there is an effort organizationally to reach out across the world to make sure that lessons that are learned elsewhere are applied, knowledge that is learned in other countries is applied in Japan. The NRA has international advisors, has had NRC staff that have assisted it in its implementation of its inspection program. The Nuclear Risk Regulatory Organization is headed by George Apostolakis, is a former NRC commissioner and former professor at MIT whose work focused on PRAs. JANSI has strong connections, I know, with INPO, and I preserve with Awano. The Atomic Energy the Atomic Energy Association is modeled on the Nuclear Energy Institute in the United States and has a close connection with them, and is learning how the NEA is effective as an intermediary between the industry and the utilities. So in conclusion, let me just say, I think that the report is excellent. If I had any comment, and it's really a minor comment, I would supplement it by pointing to the value of creating enduring and complementary institutions to achieve safety. And there has been remarkable progress in this area in Japan. So Bill, thank you.
Thank you very much. Very, very insightful remarks, and thank you for highlighting the institutions. And I think that both of us would focus particularly on the NRA, the regulatory authority within Japan. I think both of us were involved in the very early days of the formation of the NRA, and I think that everyone on today has had some interaction with the NRA. And I certainly think that both the first chairman of NRA, Dr. Tanaka, and the current chairman, Dr. Fuketa, have both done amazing jobs under very difficult circumstances. And I do hope the report adequately reflects that. So, but thank you for pointing out the institutions. I will answer one question we've seen online. The slides of the presenters will be made available online later, so we'll make sure that you are able to access those. Our next speaker is going to be Mr. Ingemar Enquist, who is the CEO of WANO. Ingemar is another great partner of the NEA. Very great pleasure to have him with us today. Ingemar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bill. Just to explain what WANO is, it is a member organization with some 440 reactors around the world, and we are focusing on the operational safety of these reactors. Just for an example, Mr. Gupta spoke about mobile diesels, pumps, etc. When we do missions, review missions, we look at the availability of those and the maintenance in the field, not only that they exist. So WANO is very much based on field activities. I will start off with a few personal words. During 2011, I was the board member of all the Swedish nuclear facilities. I was chairman of one plant, vice chairman of another, and I was working for the German company E.ON and was a part of the management of the German-Swedish nuclear fleet. Weeks before the accident, we were negotiating with suppliers to ensure capacity to extend the lifetime for our German units. Everything changed overnight. There was no lifetime extension possible anymore. Quite the opposite. The German government decided on early retirement of many of the German plants. And for myself, apart from being in the media spotlight, I had to take care of my own staff. We all felt ashamed that we in this industry had created another accident affecting so many people. I also had to defend our industry during social dinners and meeting with friends and people in the streets, because they all knew I was representing the nuclear industry. On that day, the 11th of March, I immediately contacted all key decision makers in the Swedish nuclear industry to quickly review if the Swedish plants were safe to operate. And I was expecting a report on the Monday after the weekend. And of course, the evaluation was based on very limited information, apart from we knew there was a tsunami which had taken place. I also strongly supported the idea of European stress tests and the insights it created. For us, in the Swedish industry, an independent water source to cool the reactors came into focus. Also, we realized that the dependence of our safety systems were very much based on availability of power. There was a low degree of passive systems, and we had to deal with that. I'd like to commend NEA for this excellent report. It captures many aspects of the causes and consequences of the Fukushima accident, as well as the greater implication to the Japanese society. And when reading it, I found it particularly interesting, and which is highlighted in the report. There is a small section on the influence of the design, planning for the unthinkable, and preparation of severe accident management, the influence of decision-making and organizational effectiveness, the importance of nuclear safety culture, but also the influence of a national culture, the necessity to have a systemic approach on safety or a holistic view including defense in depth, the role of regulators and their independence. At the time after the Fukushima accident, when the requirements were increased on the operators, there is always tension between the operators and the regulators. But from my personal point of view, it's always the regulators that should have the final word, not the operators, because that's protecting our industry as well. We need to protect the confidence for us as responsible operators. I also recognize the enormous efforts made by TEPCO, Japan as a country, and the international community to correct the situation and restore the area. And these efforts lead me to a perspective of being proactive versus reactive. The cost of something going wrong exceeds any cost for mitigating these events and preparation for the worst. And therefore, our members, the nuclear industry, has committed to be worldwide leaders in nuclear safety, which means it's not the regulators, not policymakers, not non-governmental organizations, not media, not the public. We as an industry should lead the development of nuclear safety. The members have committed to maximize the safety and reliability of nuclear power plants worldwide by working together to assess, to benchmark, to improve the performance through mutual support, exchange of information, and emulation of best practices. And these are not empty words, but something which is being practiced today. And we realize if we want to achieve to be the worldwide leaders, there is nothing as compliance with minimum standards. Best standards should be applied. And our members have committed now, recently, to improve the operational safety of nuclear power plants and facilities worldwide. And there is a particular focus on mutual support to those plants for various reasons need more help. And you can ask yourself, why now? Well, first of all, our members respect and accept the unique responsibility we have for safety of our people, our society, and the environment. Many members have large investment plans, new units, new technologies, lifetime extensions, power upgrades. All these plans would become obsolete if we have another accident. Climate change is in focus. To significantly reduce our carbon footprint, we need to use all low carbon technologies, not only for electricity production, but equally important is for heating, transportation, manufacturing, etc. The electricity demand will grow rapidly. And the younger generation of today don't have the same emotional reaction to nuclear power. Some are not even aware of the Fukushima accident. But if we as operators don't behave responsibly, operate safely, and are reliable and available source of energy, things can change quickly. Have we as an industry learned our lessons? I think we have learned a lot. The industry is safer now than ever. But we need to understand the worldwide safety performance, and we need to learn from the best in the field. And we can't stop now. There is still work to do, and there is nothing such as good enough. So that's my perspectives on the report. I'll thank you, Bill, for initiating this. It's really valuable material for all of us.
Very, very excellent remarks, Ingemar. Thank you very much. And again, I do agree that the industry has the principal obligation here to find the path to enhance safety. And that isn't just about the equipment, it's about the people. And your points highlight that very well. And I'm very proud that WANO and NEA work together on country-specific safety culture fora, which we've done in 2 countries and hope to do in many more countries as soon as this pandemic is over. Again, thank you for your remarks. We'll move on to the next speaker, which is Dr. Claire Cousins. Claire is the chair of the International Commission on Radiological Protection, the ICRP, which is really the global organization for knowledge and advancement in radiation protection. And Claire will give some perspectives on the lessons we have learned from the accident, as well as future activities. So Claire, the floor is yours.
Bill, thank you very much. And thank you also for the opportunity to be involved in the report and in this webinar today. Could I have my slides, please? Thank you. Could I have the next slide, please? So I'm going to say in the next few minutes a little bit about ICRP and what we have done over the last decade in regards to the Fukushima Daiichi accident. ICRP has been involved with Japanese colleagues and the people of Japan from the early days following the accident. We like to think that we, the Commission, reacted promptly and concretely to the situation. Initially, we sent early letters of sympathy to the people of Japan and have subsequently sent anniversary messages. These were things that were relatively easy and straightforward to do at the start. Next slide, please. Obviously, doing more practical things to be able to help required a little bit more time and thought. But fairly soon after the accident, we established Task Group 84. This was led by the then Vice Chair of ICRP, Abel Gonzalez. And this was actually to look at lessons that we could learn in ICRP related to the accident and to our system of radiological protection. In autumn of 2011, we actually then began the Dialogue initiative, which I'm going to say a little bit more about. ICRP also had a main commission meeting in Fukushima City in October 2012, and that meant that we could see firsthand effects of the accident and the tsunami. In 2013, we established Task Group 93, and this was to update our previous publications of 109 and 111 following the experience of the accident. This is now publication 146, and again, I'm going to mention that. And then only in the last December 2020, we have held a virtual international conference on recovery after the large nuclear accidents, particularly focusing on Fukushima. Next slide, please. So a little on Task Group 84. As I say, this was established in 2011 and it released its findings in November 2012. This was not a published report in the annals of ICRP, but a report to the main commission. And it showed 18 issues and made 11 recommendations on a whole variety of aspects relating to the system of radiological protection. We wanted to improve our understanding. We could see that there was need to resolve some confusion and various technical issues. It looked at all aspects on radiation risk, quantities, protection levels, psychosocial consequences, and how to protect rescuers with public monitoring, etc. All of these things have had a resulting influence on ICRP's programme of work. Next slide, please. The Fukushima Dialogue is something that we've been very proud of, really, over the last decade at ICRP. What it's been is a series of 22 meetings that have happened over the last decade, held in the Fukushima prefecture. And this was to openly discuss challenges of the recovery process and to share experiences. It brought together experts, both national and international, and those affected by the Chernobyl accident, authorities, local communities, and most importantly, individual citizens. The initiative was led by ICRP initially with the support of foreign organisations, and I'm very grateful to NEA and many other international organisations who have been part of this process. Subsequently, it's been more joint cooperation between the residents of Fukushima and ICRP, supported by Japanese organisations. Next slide, please. And this timeline just very briefly shows how the dialogue has progressed from 2011 up until today. The initial 4 years were led by ICRP. ICRP was then still involved, but it was more local people that were leading the dialogues in collaboration with ICRP. And then ICRP has stepped back even further so that the dialogues are now led by a local NPO, and hopefully will continue to be so. ICRP will definitely still be involved. Next slide, please. Many topics have been openly discussed as part of the Fukushima Dialogue. These are all relevant to people who have been affected by the disaster. The rehabilitation of living conditions, education of children and youth. Should people actually return or not? Should they stay? Should they leave? Very importantly, the value of tradition and culture in Fukushima, and of course, sharing the experience that people have gained together. Next slide, please. Task Group 93, which was established in 2013, was led by Michiaki Kai and Toshimitsu Homa, both Japanese members of ICRP. This has become publication 146 only in December 2020. Next slide, please. What this publication does is actually replace or supersede our previous publications 109 on the application of the Commission's recommendations for the protection of people in emergency exposure situations, and publication 111, application of the Commission's recommendations to the protection of people living in long-term contaminated areas after a nuclear accident or a radiation emergency. This publication, as I say, will supersede these two. These were actually published only in 2009, so the need to actually revise them was seen very quickly following the Fukushima accident. Next slide, please. And what does this publication contain? Well, it focuses on early, intermediate and long-term phases following an accident. It also focuses very heavily on environmental, societal and economic consequences, all things that we know are very important. It deals with protection of responders. It highlights the co-expertise process as part of the success going forward. It sets reference levels and has annexes in particular detail on both Chernobyl and on Fukushima. Next slide, please. The recovery conference that should actually have been held physically in Fukushima in December 2020, but had to become a virtual conference, was deemed appropriate at nearly a decade after the accident. ICRP wanted to be able to reflect on the lessons and experiences that we had actually learned, but also to consider what still needed to be done. We realise that many organisations and authorities and individuals have worked very tirelessly over the last decade to try and improve the people's lives of those affected. But it also has aided recognition of the challenges still facing residents of Fukushima. And I'm very pleased to say that we had well over 2,000 participants from over 100 countries as part of the conference. Next slide, please. What the conference did, of course, it involved extensive presentations and discussions. People heard individual stories and people's endeavours from those who had actually experienced the disaster. One of the main messages that ICRP has learned from this is that to recognise the importance of the co-expertise process, where authorities, experts and stakeholders work together to share experiences and information in the affected communities. And then we have the objective of developing a practical radiological protection culture and enabling individuals to make informed decisions about their own lives during the recovery. What this means in practice that the best approach is working with affected people and not actually for them. It's very important to have them involved. Next slide, please. And so what has ICRP really learned from the Fukushima accident? We've learned that the human and ethical dimension of the nuclear accident, it leaves a legacy that can then help support those who may be affected in the future. And these dimensions are, of course, at least as significant as the effects of radiation, likely even more so. Next slide, please. We've also learned that encouraging self-help protection of affected communities is very important as part of developing a practical radiological protection culture. Next slide, please. And so what does ICRP see as important issues for Fukushima as ongoing issues? Obviously, the decommissioning of the Fukushima Daiichi accident plant, but in addition, managing waste from the decontamination process, the release of the radioactive water potentially into the ocean or into the air, the returning and living in affected areas of Fukushima for those who are maybe still trying to return, the surveillance of the local people and their health, and importantly too, organising memory of events for future generations. Next slide, please. So going forward, we see that dialogue and communication with local people regarding the past experience is key. Japan will continue to work with the Japanese colleagues and people, and lessons learned from the large nuclear accident will form part of its revised recommendations. And ICRP is now undergoing an extensive review of the system of radiological protection, hopefully leading to new revised recommendations in about a decade's time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Claire. Excellent remarks. And I do want to congratulate ICRP on Fukushima Dialogues. I thought that was an excellent initiative that proved to be tremendously important. I participated in one event, and NEA participated, I think, in almost all the events. And I think they laid some very important groundwork. As I think Dr. Yamada highlighted, stakeholder engagement. And NDF holds very impressive public meetings once a year under normal non-pandemic conditions. And I do think the ICRP was ahead of the game when it came to engaging with the public. And now I believe that most people understand that that kind of public engagement is absolutely essential to have sustainable decisions going forward. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to the very last speaker this morning. Then we'll have some discussion and answer some of the questions that have come in. And the next speaker is going to be Dr. Rosie Yang. Rosa and I have known each other for many more years than either of us are going to admit to. But Rosa, it's a pleasure to have you. I have not had a chance to talk to you since you served as a mentor at our international mentoring workshop about a year or so ago. So it's good to see you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bill. It's a great honor for me to join this panel of distinguished panelists. And as a last speaker, I think the advantage is many of the important points has been made. So I'll keep my remark more close to something EPRI has contributed during the last 10 years. Like Bill, thank you. Like Bill, the Fukushima accident is an important part for me, for both EPRI and me personally, because it's really have a significant impact on my career. Next slide, please. So there are three key points I like to make during my remark. As a couple of the speakers already mentioned, many of the important lessons has been learned. I will highlight some of the analyses that EPRI contributed, but as Yamana Sensei said, the forensic studies at Fukushima Daiichi really contribute a lot to the lessons we learned from actually three very different accidents at Fukushima. As a result, we strongly believe that the nuclear industry today is much stronger and safer. The second point has been made already by other speakers as well, is the international support and working together with the Japanese colleagues, not just on decommissioning, but on restart and some of the other issues. The third point I like to make is international collaboration and the technology development and technology focused approach are essential to EPRI's mission. So in my remark, I'm going to go in the reverse order first, just a couple of words about who EPRI is. And next slide, please. So EPRI is a research organization providing solutions to the utility industry to make plants, nuclear plants, in my case, running safer, more reliable. And as you can see, we have a large number of international participants. TEPCO is one of the key one, and it has been a member of EPRI for the last more than 20 years. So in March 11, 2011, next slide, please. I was exactly March 11, I was prepared to fly to Japan to meet up with TEPCO and other Japanese colleagues. And when I heard about the accident, like many of us, especially me, being trained in the BWR community, I thought there are ample redundant safety systems. So this should not be a problem until the next day when I landed in Japan. The world has changed. I remember clearly how I walked around in Tokyo that weekend and how I met up with some of the Japanese colleagues to get the latest news on the degradation of Unit 1. Anyway, as a result of being there, I spent a number of days with some TEPCO colleague. I see one of the pictures missing, maybe you need to advance a slide. So because of the accident, the cooling system of the 3 units has been completely destroyed. So the contaminated water was flowing from, sorry, can you go back to the last slide, please? Was flowing from the core to the turbine building and to the ground and to the ocean eventually. So the water needs to be collected and cleaned. So my colleague there called after a week later, after I returned to the US, about if there are any suggestions for a cleanup system. So it turns out 3 months before the accident, EPRI published a report on how to remove cobalt in different environments. So we provided the support and introduced the Curion to TEPCO, and of course TEPCO and Curion worked together a cleanup system, as you can see in the picture. And the leader of that project was Shinichi Suzuki-san of TEPCO. And you know, although EPRI's role was just to provide the technology, provide the link, but I believe that's very much what EPRI does, is connecting to technology to solutions. Although we played a very small role, but we feel pretty gratified because the system was the first operational at Fukushima, and it has probably minimized a lot of contaminant flowing into the ocean. So another action EPRI took in May of 2011 is a team of EPRI and some US utility people visited Fukushima Daiichi, which is the plant down south, as you can see in the picture, and performed a walk down at the request of TEPCO that confirmed the safety shutdown and observed and documented the damage. And we concluded that most of the damage were not due to seismic activity, rather from the tsunami. Of course, there was this TMI accident years earlier, and many of the lessons learned were documented in reports. So we provided those to TEPCO. Those are the effort immediately after the accident. Next slide, please. So in terms of decommissioning, I think in the report, we talk about that the MAP code, which is a severe accident code, EPRI developed after 3 Mile Island accident. So a lot of BWR features were not there. A lot of lessons were not learned. So we incorporate the lessons learned from the Fukushima accident and use it to further understand the accident. I think the lessons learned are pretty, were incorporated, and the forensic information that, again, Yamana Sensei mentioned that TEPCO has conducted were incorporated in the understanding. Personally, I'm a member of the International Expert Group, IEG, which supported TEPCO with technical issues related to decommissioning. We also provided some innovative technologies on the decommissioning. Next slide, please. I think the more important effort EPRI made in the last 10 years, I already talked about the root cause evaluation. This is in cooperation with international community, with DOE, with NRC, with EDF. So we compare notes to make sure we fully understand the accident at Fukushima. Another really pretty major effort is that I think the whole industry recognized we needed to go beyond the design base of LOCA and the reactivity initiated accident, but looking at external events. So these are low probability, but high consequence, and how does one quantify it, look at the priority of it. So significant amount of work has been conducted by EPRI with the international community on seismic and flooding. Another effort is the Severe Accident Management Guidelines, SAMG, as is affectionately called at times. That was first published in 1993. And then it was revised in 2012 based on some of the insight learned. Work on the safety of spent fuel pool. Should we remove spent fuel to dry storage as quickly as possible? And the radiological release mitigation, which Claire just talked about extensively. We contribute in that area as well. So I just want to conclude my remark by saying that, that as a result of, next slide, please, I'm sorry. As a result of the work, many of the plants which have been restarted or continue in operation have implemented many safety features that has been learned since the accident. Mobile equipment, stationary equipment, centers using PRA to quantify the risk. And earlier, a speaker addressed the training of the operators, more enhanced trainings. The point I also want to make is the impact of Fukushima accident, especially in United States. Yes, it has resulted in safety upgrades, safety equipment, but the threat, if you may, or the risk to the nuclear power plants in United States today, which is running much safer, is the cost. Is the very low cost of natural gas in United States. Some of the nuclear plants face premature shutdown. As some of you may have heard, the delivering the nuclear promise, which is to find ways, innovative ways, modern ways to reduce the cost of producing safe and clean power by nuclear plants. And many of these technologies are applicable worldwide. So EPRI will continue to coordinate and provide technology development to our colleagues in Japan to support the restart and decommissioning of Fukushima Daiichi. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosa. I appreciate it very much. And I appreciate that you highlighted this discussion about beyond design basis events. I think we could probably have a very good discussion with experts on that one issue, because in my view, it's probably the single biggest regulatory impact that's occurred in the aftermath of the accident. In fact, the regulators are now regulating beyond design basis events, and that's a sea change from where we were before the accident. Let me invite all the speakers to join us on camera, and we'll start the discussion. We've got a large number of questions that come in from the audience, and I'd like to start with Dr. Yamana, and maybe Dr. Yamana, you can answer a very broad question, which is, from your perspective, what do you see as the biggest challenges ahead, both for dealing with the issues on site and also in remediating the communities around the site?
Okay, I think this question is asking about the technical difficulties at the site, remediation, and the restoration of the surrounding area. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, as I mentioned already in my previous speech, the technical difficulty in the further work of D&D is the retrieval of the fuel debris from the damaged reactor and the final treatment for this. So because of the very harsh radiation environment, we need to design a method using large-scale remote equipment that is unprecedentedly sophisticated one. And you know, the inside of the reactor is still not fully understood. So this operation will battle with the big uncertainty. So we need to be very careful about securing the safety to the workers and to the environment as well. So, and if I have to say one more, the final difficult critical path is waste management. Well, actually, the risk of the waste is not so high, but from the perspective of the long-term management, this management will be very difficult in terms of the huge mass and the variety of the nuclei of the contamination. And of course, we need a social approval for the final disposal. So these technical difficulties and the social difficulty as well as the managerial difficulties we will have to face. And about reconstruction of the area, there is no quick fix because the society itself has very severely damaged, and social infrastructure or livelihood or inviting some new industry or jobs, everything is necessary. So we will have to use long term to realize this revitalization of this area. Fortunately, the Japanese government has subsidized a lot for the reconstruction of this area by installing some new facilities to create a new industry or consulting for the for restarting their livelihood, etc. So anyway, this is a socio-economic challenge, and this will need a great help from the government.
Thank you very much. And
Is that good? Yeah.
yes, yeah, thank you very much. And let me just have one quick follow-up. We had a question that came in from India about the core debris. And I agree that that is going to be the biggest challenge that you will face from a technical standpoint in dealing with the issues on site. But the question was whether there's any thought about what the ultimate disposal path for the core debris might be. Is there any discussion yet in Japan about where the material will ultimately be disposed of?
Well, it is the biggest subject at the end of this decommissioning work. However, what I can say now is it is too early to say about this because we don't have any information about the fuel debris itself and the situation inside the reactors. So without having a concrete idea for the retrieval methodology, we cannot estimate, we cannot imagine the recovered fuel debris material. I mean, how big, how long, how stable, etc. So I would say we will still need more time to examine the status inside of the reactor, and then we can start considering about the final disposal of the recovered fuel debris.
Thank you very much. Well, let me shift to a more international perspective on this. We already had some discussions. I think Rosa highlighted some things. Mr. Gupta, you highlighted some things that have been done around the world to improve nuclear safety. And I wonder if we could look at it from a regulatory perspective, maybe starting with you, Mr. Gupta. What do you see as the biggest improvement in safety that's occurred since the accident? Can you point to any one or two things that you think have made the biggest difference?
I think they have been pointed out in the various preliminary comments. For instance, the additional power sources that were added on many power plants, and also which are able to resist extreme natural hazards. Another example is implementing a diverse ultimate heat sink. And if I could quote a third example, Mrs. Yang was talking about going beyond design, means to cool the corium inside the containment in case a severe accident occurs. That is also the kind of improvement that has been implemented in some power plants.
Thank you. And Dick Meserve, you've had, in various roles you've looked at these issues. I wonder if you have anything to add.
Well, let me say, first of all, I very much agree that with Mr. Gupta's comments about one of the major lessons has been capacity to deal with external events, recognizing that there's risks from earthquakes, from tsunamis, flooding, and every regulator looked at the capacity of their plants to deal with them. And quite frankly, this is going to be a continuing problem because of climate change. We're going to have more extreme weather. Flooding is an issue, sea level rise. So this is a challenge for engineering facilities of all type, and that is going to have to be a continuing effort by in the nuclear sector. I think that also why another major element, and this is consistent with Mr. Gupta's comment, is what you agreed is we need to deal with beyond design basis events and think deeply about them. Station blackout, availability of an ultimate heat sink, the sort of responses that every responsible utility is performing is in terms of having equipment that's available, training on how to use it. Generators, emergency power, hookups that are fully prepared to be able to deal with events way beyond those that you've ever thought you were going to contemplate. I think there are some soft lessons too. This is actually in response to one of the comments was asked. I think that there isn't any effort by strengthening the regulatory requirements to deal with them, that there's that to remove responsibility from the licensees. That one of the problems in Japan at the Fukushima accident was that the chain of command was not at all clear, that the site manager, plant manager, knew much more about what was going on, but he was referring everything originally to TEPCO. And then TEPCO was looking to the government, ultimately to the Prime Minister's office, for decisions on how to deal with accidents. And you know that regulatory compliance isn't enough. Every licensee has the responsibility to assure safety, and that should be seen as a really fundamental lesson from this accident. And I think also, it's, one other thing I'd say, I think that also there's been several comments made about the deaths that resulted after the accident because of the forced evacuation of people, particularly from ICUs. And you know, there's one thing we learned is that the emergency preparedness and thinking through the timing of when you do things and so forth is a really important lesson for Fukushima.
Thank you for raising that. I think we might try to get back to that before the end of the discussion, because I think we had several questions along those lines that I'd like to dig into. But let me pick up on something that Dr. Meserve said a few minutes ago, Ingemar, and that is all these changes to the regulatory infrastructure around the world. As Rose and I had talked about, the move towards regulating beyond design basis events, and really just the general conservatism that's come into the system over the last 10 years. And maybe you could comment on this from your perspective. Where is the industry today? Do we have a healthier industry overall, a safer industry, or just one that's just has more regulations to meet without necessarily being safer? How do you see this?
Well, as I said, I believe that the industry is much safer today than it used to be, considering what the remarks already mentioned with beyond design accidents and additional equipment on site and so on. I would like, maybe it's a little bit narrow perspective, but I'll look at from my Swedish perspective at the time. I think it's valid actually for Europe. With all these new requirements coming in from regulators on equipment, additional, as we know, is very valuable with an independent water source and all these things. The operators didn't have the full capacity to focus also on the day-to-day operational safety of plants. And I believe that putting too much focus on technical things move away and sort of leaves the operators to actually decline, I would say, to substandards. At least from my point of view, we had substandards applied in the power plants because everybody were focused on these enormous investments we had to make to get an additional period to operate these plants. So that was, I think that was a bit of a mistake that many regulators, especially in Europe, focus so much on the technical things on a plant. Of course, it is important. We need to have that defense in our design. But we must not forget, as you said, Bill, these plants are operated by human beings, and we need everyone to be committed to safety. All times of the year, every day, every minute, and we need to have proficient organizations. We can manage the day-to-day safety of a plant, and that's what we do in WANO. And I've seen this through our missions. We do peer reviews. We look at the performance of stations, and many have done extraordinary things to technically improve the safety, but not enough in improving day-to-day safety. That's my view.
Yeah, very important point. Yeah, Bill, please, Mike.
If I may add to that and to Dick's very helpful comments, I think one of the aspects which we touch on in the report is about looking at the whole way in which the institutions work together as a system, and trying to strengthen that system on a system basis. So not just looking at what the industry does or what the regulatory does, but seeing what the whole system does, and looking at the interactions between the system to enhance the robustness of the system. So taking forward the principles of nuclear safety about strength in depth, diversity, redundancy, and applying it to the institutions as well, and the institutional systems is an important aspect, I think, that's come out of the Fukushima Daiichi accident there. So I just want to emphasize that it brings things onto a different basis, and that we have tried to point that out in the report for something that we can take forward into the future.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Mike. Rosa, let me ask you to comment on this. Because you talked about a wide range of technical issues, but in the big picture, how, from an EPRI standpoint, how do you see the impact on the industry overall? What is your view of where we are and where we're going?
Boy, that's a big question. The impact on the industry from the Fukushima accident vary considerably from country to country. You know, the Germans shut down many plants prematurely, but just very recently, EDF got 10-year extension of their nuclear fleet. And in the US, the impact of Fukushima, I would say, is manageable. They're spent on training, they're spent on flexible equipment. And so I honestly believe the plants are safer today. And as you know, many of the US plants are looking at 80 years. I think it's an important source of no carbon power generation. But there is this challenge of cost as a result of a lot of the improvement which are necessary, but it inevitably reduce the cost. So as some of you may know, the US power plants are working very hard for the last 7 or 8 years on delivering the nuclear promise, which is a way to look at how do we keep nuclear plants running and still compete in the market. So we're looking at innovative ways with machine, with AI to reduce the cost. So personally, I think there is a bright future for nuclear, but it's not a slam dunk. It's not a given. We need to work real hard to continue to make the plants run more efficiently, more safely. I forgot, one of the speakers mentioned if we have another accident, I think the industry would be in a very bad shape. So I think we should all try very hard. And of course, from EPRI, I'm looking at technology, but there are other aspects, political, environment, economic. We need to look at all the factors to make plants safer, more economic, and continue building new plants as well. Many of you know that they are safer, they have lower core damage frequencies. So I'm a strong believer in nuclear.
May I add to that?
Please.
Just to give a picture, at the time after the Fukushima accident, when we discussed an independent way of cooling the reactors, we estimated the initial requirements from the regulator meant that we had to invest 1.7 billion euros in 10 reactors. And that was, of course, not feasible. So the outcome was we decided to shut down a few, which were at the didn't deserve a lifetime extension, couldn't be competitive on the market with a lifetime extension implementing this. So right now, from at the time 10 reactors, we're down to 6 reactors, which will operate for 40 years or 60 years, sorry. So it had significant implications, but it had also other implications that after the accident, it became a discussion. The discussion about technologies became very polarized. And in Europe, it was a discussion whether it was nuclear or renewables. And that disturbed the markets. Those who were the areas which had really functioning markets, because there were subsidies put on renewables and so on. And that created a very difficult situation for the nuclear industry in Europe. We now know that we have to embrace all low carbon emitting technologies. We need to embrace renewables as well as nuclear. But that time, those, I would say 10 years after, or 5 years after the accident, created a lot of harm to the electricity market because of subsidies and this polarized discussion. Is it this or that? Now we know it's both.
Thank you, Ingeborg. Let me ask you a completely different question that came over from the observers. Is the work done? Have we implemented the post-Fukushima lessons around the world effectively? Because you as from WANO standpoint, you probably have a better view on this than really anyone. How are we doing? Are there places where we are still behind, or are most of your members where they need to be now?
Most members are where they need to be, must say. There has been extraordinary efforts done and a lot of projects have been implemented. We find sometimes when we review plans that not everything is perfect. We don't review design itself. We just see how maybe design vulnerabilities are managed on a plant. But I can conclude, yes, there has been a lot of efforts done. I think we are where we should be more or less, with a few deviations. We have transformed the industry also to now to speak about performance and openly share weaknesses in a different way than we used to 10 years ago. WANO evaluates each plant and rates them on a scale where that helps us focus on the ones which need more help. And all members of WANO are committed to help the weaker stations around the world, to help them improve. And I think that's a significant breakthrough, really, that all operators are willing to invest in other operators' plants just to make them safer. So this is a new mindset, which I think is very, very positive.
Thank you.
Maybe, Bill, if you allow me on a regulator's perspective,
please.
I can confirm that the operators have performed a huge job. They have made huge investments. And that's also a reason why it took some time to implement all these modifications. We know some stakeholders wanted everything to be done very, very quickly, which was obviously not possible given the amount of modifications, of also technical studies to perform. But yes, we have to acknowledge that.
Thank you. And since you're on screen, I will ask you a question to follow up on something that Dr. Meserve raised, and that is this issue of emergency preparedness. And Claire, please be ready. You're next. I wanted you to also respond to this. There's an interesting question that came across that basically suggested that when you look at the last 10 years, the response to the emergency in Japan actually caused more harm to people than the initial event. Due to the dislocations, the economic damage, all the other things that occurred. And of course, we talked about the need for the emergency preparedness system to take into account social psychological effects. When you look at that picture, what's your reaction to that? And this is not an uncommon comment that we get, that the cure was perhaps worse than the sickness. I wonder if you could react to that.
My reaction would have it been acceptable not to react at all, or not to have that kind of reaction, even though there have been the consequences that you say. I think that during an accident where there are some radioactive releases, there is also, I think, a wish from the public to stay protected from ionizing radiation in an as low as reasonably possible manner. So I'm not sure anything else could have been done.
Claire, what do you think?
I agree. Like all things, it's very easy to comment now with hindsight. I think at the time, people acted with, of course, the best of intentions. And exactly as Olivia says, we're trying to do the low as reasonably achievable. Of course, that's what people were trying to be protected for. So I think we're not in a position now to criticise what was actually done, but what we do have to do is look and see how we can be better prepared. We can learn, is it really necessary, as you say, to take people from an ICU when they are already very vulnerable? These are the sort of things that we do have to then try and put in place. Heaven forbid, should this ever happen again. And you mentioned the psychosocial consequences. Yes, of course, they have been enormous on society. Maybe some of that could have been predicted, but the actions had to be taken anyway. I suspect a lot probably could not have been predicted with all the best will in the world. So, as I say, I don't think we can criticise what was actually done at the time.
We also had some questions about whether the thresholds for radiation exposure are part of the either, well, I'll put it in the way that it was sort of suggested in the question, part of the problem. Are we trying to keep, and I know this is something ICRP gives a lot of thought to, are the standards for evacuation, for reoccupation, are they so stringent that they, in the end, again, to use that terminology, they do more harm than good? Has ICRP been thinking about that in the context of all these lessons?
Yes, of course we have, and this will also be part of our system review. Actually, going forward, we will again be looking at all of our dose limits, dose constraints, reference levels, etc., as we review the system. And again, it's getting the balance right. It's getting the reasonable part with the actual, what actually is also practicable. And that's why ICRP, again, over the years, has tried very hard to set its reference levels, etc., at what is our reasonable levels. But, in light of practice and experience, sometimes it is obviously proved quite difficult to then put that into practice. We understand that, and particularly with the public level of 1 millisievert, at the time we can understand that was actually also quite a difficult concept to be understood and then to be actioned. And as I say, we will look at this. I'm not saying it means we're going to change anything with the review, but this is all part of what we will be doing over the next 10 years.
Thank you. Dr. Yamana, just a very practical question. We had a large Earth movement event, earthquake, that struck the Fukushima region just about a month ago. Can you give us a report on what's happened? Was there any significant effect from that earthquake in Japan last month at the site?
That earthquake was grade 6, or grade 6 plus. And the magnitude was 7. It's about 1/1000th of the 10 years ago. Okay, and yes, the shaking was very big, and the acceleration at Fukushima Daiichi site was observed to be 230 GeV. It's about half or something of the 10 years ago. And yes, we had some happening on the water level inside the containment vessel. There is a water in the containment vessel, but after the earthquake, the water level is decreasing slowly, meaning that there may be caused a certain increase of the space of the water leakage on the wall of the PCB. So, but this is not so serious one. And the damage to the people, yes, there are some influence to the houses and some infrastructures, but there was no serious damage to the people's life and health. The train was stopped for a week, and I think there is some confusion, but it's not so serious earthquake.
While I have you on screen, I know we're getting short on time. We also, I know a lot of people are watching very closely the decisions made that affect reputational damage in the region for food products, for fishery. What's your thought about where things are today with dealing with those reputational issues regarding food products in particular?
Are you asking me?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, the reputational damage is a very serious one in Japan. This is the sociological, very bad damage. And, you know, well, I would say that so this is a very sociological phenomena. So I'm not a specialist in this area, but I think this reputational damage is a combination of some different aspects. One is worry about radiation safety. It's a very general, unconscious worry about the radiation safety among the people. And the second one is some hidden problem in the food distribution system in the market. There is some economical strange mechanism to make it. Okay, this is a economical problem. And the third one is the information dissemination. I mean, by the information given by the media or the social network servicing, some rumors are easily spread to the people, and they are very likely to believe it. So then, people who are distant from Fukushima Daiichi are very, very likely to dislike things coming from Fukushima, just emotional things. Rather than that, the people in Fukushima Prefecture knows about the radiation safety now, very clever now. So it's a sociological effect over a non-conscious people over the nation. Sorry, my English is not good.
Yeah. No,
So
I think you're.
I would say there is no definite answer to solve this. We need to continue to give them information steadily, continuously, with a faithful attitude. That's all.
Thank you very much. And I mentioned the ICRP dialogues in Fukushima. And I saw how people they've become so sophisticated in dealing with radiation issues. And so when people have the information, they are in a very powerful position to make good decisions. Well, I'm afraid that we are out of time. It's unbelievable. It seems like we are just getting started. But I'd like to thank, again, all the speakers for their contributions. I, again, encourage everyone to take a look at the report. I'll reiterate, a Japanese version will be available. So hopefully people in Japan will have an opportunity to read this report and get a good broad view on what's happened, what's been happening since. So again, thank you, and I wish you all to have a good day, and we will all next week on March 11th be thinking about everything that has happened over the last 10 years, thinking about the people who lost their lives, thinking about all the efforts that have gone in the aftermath of the accident, and to make sure that we reemphasize, and I think everyone here will agree that to reemphasize that it's important to communicate to everyone in the nuclear sector that we all have a personal responsibility to assure safety, and that we all have a personal responsibility to make sure that nothing like the Fukushima Daiichi accident ever happens again. So again, thank you, and thank all of you who joined us online today. And with that, I will ask the disembodied voices to sign us off.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to our distinguished guests, and thank you very much to all who listened in. We appreciate your participation. The new report of the NEA on today's topic is available now for downloading from our website. Today's expert roundtable has been recorded and will be available on our website soon. You can also follow the NEA on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook to keep in touch with us and receive updates on our programs and events like this one. Thank you, and goodbye for now.